My name is Skip Hank, and I have the honor and privilege of being the President and CEO of Xplor. And on behalf of Xplor and our Board of Directors, I want to welcome everybody this morning. We are starting early because last year previous to this, we started from 7:30 to 8:30 and then 8:30 to 10. And we did surveys and people would come back and say, you know, that 7:30 thing's a little bit early, and I didn't catch the bus, I overslept, I had too much fun the night before. So I moved it from 8:30 to 9:30 this year, not expecting that this many people would show up this early to be here for the event. So thank you all for being here.
Congratulations, thank you.
Good job. It might have been because it was following a Sunday night also, I don't know. But normally we have this on a Tuesday, right? Yeah. Before we get started, and I turn the mic over to Pat, I want to thank our sponsors, Canon Solutions America, all the folks over there, and Crawford Technologies. Keep my applause meter.
Yes.
So,
I'm the applause sign.
for their support. Both Canon and Crawford are part of the group of elite sponsors that provide support to Xplor, which provides ongoing education opportunities like this, and our roadshow, and our webinars, and all that stuff, and they help keep the lights on, so it's very, very important. I also want to thank Keypoint Intelligence and Pat McGrew for being here and for their support. This is the 6th or 7th year that they've been involved. We also have the honor of having another director here, Ron Gilboa. Group director. Ron, let's see your hand. There you go. Okay. And of course, we want to thank all of the people at Print 18 for accommodating us and supporting this breakfast, in panel. Couple housekeeping things. Please put your cell phones on mute or vibrate. You can tweet to your heart's delight. You know, we encourage that. It's hashtag Print18 at Xplor International. So if you want to tweet, you know, and it's also a good way to use that cell phone without looking obvious. So if you did not receive your exhibit hall pass at the registration, then there are passes out at the registration. If for some reason you just decided to come this morning and didn't register, which is fine, we appreciate that. When you go up to get an exhibit hall pass, if you use promo code PR105, you'll get a free exhibit hall pass that will waive the $35 fee for you. So either way, you're covered. Before I turn the mic over to Pat, everybody knows Pat. She's a legend in the industry, and a huge, huge supporter of Xplor.
You're saying I'm old.
No. It's okay. Yeah. So we've just been around. We have a lot of experience.
We're experienced.
But Pat's been a huge supporter of Xplor for many, 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 okay, I won't say 3
Thank
years,
you.
but many years.
Thank you.
And we're happy to have her moderating the panel. Our panelists this morning are Stephanie Pieruccini from Crawford Technology. Stephanie is also on the Xplor Board of Directors, and Kevin Roman, who I've had the privilege of working with in the past, and he'll be representing Canon Solutions America. So with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Pat. Is there anything I'm missing?
I don't think so.
Okay.
We're just going to have some fun.
Yep.
All right. Here, I just need that.
Okay.
So thanks all for getting up this morning. I'm not going to ask what you're doing last night. I think it's better that way for all of us. What we wanted to do was put together something that would be a little bit of fun, but also informative. So I have a couple of slides that I'm going to go through, and then we're going to start a cadence of looking at a little bit of data and then talking about it. Some of you were kind enough to send some questions in ahead of time, and some of you may have questions as we go along. And what I want to encourage you to do is to challenge us if you hear something that you think is just flat wrong or doesn't meet your experience. So when we were getting ready for this event, we did a survey of Xplor members, and the survey that we did which is where we're getting this little bit of data to start with, actually involved compliance audits. Now, there was a reason for that. It might seem like, you know, how did you come up with compliance audits and you're talking about disruption? There is a sister group to Xplor called the Imaging Network Group. And that group meets on a twice-a-year cadence, and they work with Keypoint Intelligence to survey their members on a regular basis. And the survey that they had just completed when Skip and I were talking about this morning was their survey on compliance audits. So we took those same questions and we sent them out to the Xplor membership. And 25 of our Xplor members responded. Now, I'm not excited about the response rate. I'd have liked to have seen it higher, but I got 25 responses and I'm going to run with it because as a rule, the passionate Xplor members who respond to things like surveys actually do set the cadence for the rest of the transaction printing industry and the data-driven marketing industry, data-driven direct mail marketing industry. So we did ask the question about how many security audits does your organization tend to go through? And it was really interesting. Across the 25 respondents, 2.2% told us that they do outside audits, 4% told us that they do client-requested audits. And when you get over to the right, one or more audits annually, outlying responses that were removed, so people who answered funny. What this tells us is that audits are still a big part of most transaction organizations' lives. So how many of you in here are actually transaction printers? Okay, that's a nice number. And how many of you are vendors who support transaction printers? Okie dokie. So this is something that should be important to you because from both sides, your conversations should have a compliance component, I think. So we asked them what budgets they were applying to their audits. And we were really a little bit surprised at the numbers that came back. So these numbers are really small, and I'm pretty sure we're getting copies of the decks to you. One way or another, we'll make sure that we do that. But total respondents, the average was $20,000 a year on compliance audit. The average, so that was the average for the total respondents. More than a third of respondents don't budget for outside compliance audits. We thought that was very interesting since so many of them are transaction numbers. I'm really sure someone is asking what that noise is and when it's going to stop. But you should not be asking that question because this is the panel on disruption, and what you are hearing is a little bit of disruption. Thanks, bud. So the thing that's flying over your head is a camera on a drone, so we're hoping everybody does not have a permission problem with this. As we're talking about disruption later in this session, what you're going to find is that there are a lot of different disruptive technologies, and this guy is one of them. Many of the organizations that I've worked with over the last 5 years have started employing drone cameras to help them get a good look at their operations. So a little bit later in the event, what we'll do is we'll get Buck to tell us a little bit more about this cute guy and what he's all about. So the funny thing is I'm not sure that on Chad's camera you're going to be able to see the guy flying around, but trust me, for those of you looking at the video, there's a really cool drone flying around capturing some video. So let's get back to this one so we can get into the conversation. So this is budgets for outside audits. The other thing we asked about was SLA penalty triggers, because penalty triggers are a really big issue. And what we learned at the IMG meeting over the weekend is that there's a lot of variation in what causes an SLA penalty trigger. And among explorers, we found that time from data delivery to print or the electronic delivery was the key SLA penalty trigger. And so, again, that's something for all of you vendors to take a look at to make sure that you're working with your clients to make sure that you can help them avoid those penalty triggers. And for those of you who are in the print side of the industry who are actually delivering to customers, this gives you some data that you can benchmark against. And finally, the last thing we asked is, when does an SLA penalty trigger? And it triggers at 24 hours for more than half of the companies that responded to us. And the interesting thing about that is that the mean time towards penalty trigger has really reduced and reduced and reduced. And we were talking to some companies over the last couple of days who are telling us that their SLA penalty triggers are immediate. If they don't hit their mail window at the agreed time, 1 minute later, they are paying fines. So you can see for all of the software vendors and hardware vendors in the audience, this is what your customers are fighting against and what they're trying to live with. And for all of you who are print service providers, if you're in that top group and you have a whole 24 hours, you're in heaven compared to the guys who have these immediate triggers. So it was just a little bit of data that we gathered. Again, we'll share this out with the Xplor community so that they have it to look at. And we did also share the Xplor data with the IMG community, and some of you are members of both. So you'll see that there is an interesting set of comparisons there. So we just figured that would be a little bit of data to start the morning. So now we can be disruptive again, right? Because we've had Bug School Camera. When we were looking for a theme for this morning, we wanted to talk a little bit about disruption in the industry. It's hard to find topics that haven't been thoroughly explored here in the Xplor universe, because we talk about data-driven marketing, we talk about the fun that you can have with legacy print streams, we talk about the challenges of building in new technologies into customer delivery, into customer communication delivery. So disruption seemed like an appropriate topic, especially at this year's Print 18, where if you're walking the show floor, you're seeing things look a little bit different than you've seen in years past. You're not seeing as much hardware, but quite a few of the vendors are doing virtual reality views of the hardware that they normally bring to market and that they bring to larger shows and longer shows. Part of the challenge of the 3-day show is, of course, moving hardware gets a little bit trickier. So using new technologies, innovative technologies, to bring you the highs and lows of everything that can be done with different hardware solutions is kind of an interesting and disruptive approach to a trade show. So when we asked a number of our constituents about disruption, a number of questions came to mind. And the first question was, well, what markets are we disrupting, and what the heck is disruption anyway? And I want to thank Paul Abdul for that one, because that was Paul's question. What do we mean by disruption? And I want to set a little bit of context. The retail value of print, if you look at this, it's not changing markedly from now through the next big cadence line, 2022, which is where our forecast ends, the Keypoint Intelligence forecast ends. If you look at that 34.5 to 38.1, that's kind of like flat growth. But the interesting thing is that mono is declining just slightly, and color is just picking up a little bit, but the basic retail value of print is staying kind of same. So if you're a vendor in this marketplace, whether it's hardware or software, or you're a print service provider, if you want to capture market share, you're going to need to look for some disruption so that you can hold on to and hopefully increase your market share. The other thing that we noticed is that software is changing. What people are buying it's been interesting to watch the cadence, especially over the last 3 years. See that VDP line on the far left? An awful lot of the buying that's going on with VDP tools, it's buying that's happening because people are turning over their solutions. They're deciding to go in, audit the solution sets that they have. They're making decisions to no longer pay maintenance on tools they're not using. They're making active decisions to pay for professional services and migration tools to help them move from one set of tools to another. And they're looking at new technologies to develop their VDP solutions, from transaction through to direct marketing and even out into wide format and into packaging. So that's why we see that VDP spend so high. Look all the way over on the right, the little tiny words that you probably can't read from the back of the room are their, say, online design tools. Those online design tools are things like Chili Publish, things like Canva, things like Meadows Publishing. And those are a new class of composition tools that are cloud-based and cloud-delivered. And those are going to start encroaching. Now you can see they got a ways to go, but that is one of those disruptive innovations that's changing how a lot of large organizations are looking at how they do their VDP composition. And over the next 5 years, that should actually change how a number of large enterprises engage in their VDP construction. Most of the other tools are sort of on the kind of cadence that we would expect. So that's the market landscape that we're living in. So let's come to the first question. People are buying software. That's good. They're buying hardware too, right? But those of you who are in the hardware business, you know that. They've added new inkjet devices. Has anybody in the audience bought a new inkjet device in the last 12 months? Okay, this is good news, right? This is you jumped on that inkjet bandwagon. Yay! So inkjet devices have been added, and people are telling us they know they need to make some changes. So the question is, how do you advise a customer? So Kevin, I want to start with you as our official hardware representative. And full disclosure, Kevin and I have known each other for a long time. We used to work together. And I have huge respect for his ability to go sell somebody an inkjet, because he was doing it when it was hard.
Yeah.
But how really, you were doing it when it was hard. Yeah, we both used to work for Mr. Gilboa. And so when you're advising customers, what do you do? How do you have that conversation? Because it is disruptive technology for most shops.
Absolutely, Pat. You know, when you look at the hardware side, especially back in 2008, when really inkjet was really just starting to come out there, you know, it was, how do you wrestle this gorilla, right? This opportunity at its infancy. Well, what we found in conversations with customers is that you know, you got to start ahead of the printer, right? You really got to look at how the workflow is going to actually drive the device. It's a lot of great devices out there. Obviously, I'm biased with Canon's devices, but realistically, you really got to work closely on laying out the landscape of your workflow and figuring out how are you going to be able to maximize. Because the one thing that you started seeing with inkjet is you got lots of speed, you got lots of variability, right? Now we're moving away from pre-printed forms. You got a lot there to take, you know.
And of course, we've been saying that for 15 years.
We have been saying it for 15 years. Yeah, it's time flies.
They're still out there, though.
There's a lot there.
The opportunities out there. So you really got to really lay out that landscape of where you're going, so that you can understand what you need to do to achieve those goals of going to inkjet. And I think we'll talk probably a little bit more as we continue the discussion here.
So you need to lay out a plan for your workflow. And Stephanie, as our official software representative on the panel, how are you advising customers? Because you're doing a lot of these right now where you're actually walking into a site that's planted one of these devices and now discovering that they can't get stuff to it.
That's a big problem, right? Because you buy an inkjet device and you're expanding your fleet of hardware. But how are you getting work over to that new device? Are you taking work away? Are you trying to build more business that is specific for the inkjet device? And what are you missing out on? Is there work that could go over? Is there not? So making sure that you evaluate what your strategy is for moving work, look at what documents you can move over right away, and look at other information and disconnects that you might have within your entire environment, because you get excited about the hardware that you bring in.
So from a workflow perspective, do you guys go in and do you actually like walk the workflow and audit the workflow that's already there and use that as the basis to make recommendations? Are customers nervous about you walking their workflow?
You know, it's interesting. So, are they nervous? I don't think they're nervous. I think they don't know what they don't know about their workflow. I think that is something that what we find. We go in with a workflow assessment, and we do that for multiple reasons. If you don't understand your current state, it's hard to understand how to get to the future. state. So we come in as Canon and really sit down with you and whiteboard where you're at today. And in that, we try to connect the dots with specific pain points that you're seeing in your organization. Because there's a lot of things to automate, but at the end of the day, you know, we've got to look at the crawl, walk, run in most of the cases because it's a huge endeavor. So we really leverage the opportunity to knock some of those large stones and make them smaller and really start tackling those.
And we also do workflow assessments. So we'll go in and talk to the customer. A lot of times as Crawford Technologies, they know us as the transform company. They don't necessarily think about the other solutions that we have available. So when we go in and start having a conversation and ask questions about what their business problems are, what are your goals, what are you trying to achieve, what keeps you up at night, you start hearing more and more, and they want to talk to somebody who can help them and give them advice. And I have the added benefit because I used to work at Keypoint Intelligence before it was Keypoint Intelligence. So
You know that we're all alumni of some common entity.
and that's great, right? And have you run into a situation where you go to a customer and you're doing your workflow assessment or a conversation and they're sneaky, they have another vendor in there, they want you to see who else is in there. So you know, we have the benefit of creating closer partnerships with vendors in the industry so that, you know, we sideline them. We're already prepared to solve that problem together for you.
Which is, now how many of you have had a workflow audit done in your site? For those of you who are print service providers? No? So, ooh, huge opportunity there. So for vendors out here, and we've got kind of a nice mix of hardware and software, how many of you are offering to do workflow assessments? Not just like as a casual aside, but you're actually offering them. Okay, and that's good news, right? Because that's what you want to do. It's one of those linchpins in the relationship. If you can help a customer make better decisions about the hardware and the software that they're using, you can help them create what will be for them a more disruptive environment, right? Every printer is competing with every other printer. And the funny thing is that it used to be transaction printers didn't compete with direct mailers as much, and they didn't compete with the commercial guys, and now everybody's looking at everything. I've been with commercial printers who've become transactional printers, right? And years ago, we didn't think that was a really good idea. But now, because it's possible to build that compliance environment, and it's possible to build that secure environment to do it, you know, everybody's your competitor is probably the moral of that story.
Well, the solutions have catered to that, right? It used to be if you wanted to do direct mail and you wanted to do commercial print, you wanted to do publication printing, you had to buy different software for all of them.
Right.
And now you have solutions, and Canon and both Crawford have solutions that can manage any environment. Even if you have wide format, if you want to do signs in addition to your transactional printing, you can have one workflow solution to manage that.
Right, and that's an important thing to remember. You don't need 52 workflows because you do 52 different kinds of jobs. It's possible to build a master workflow and build the pipes that allow you to do a lot of different kinds of work using a master framework. And that's the key to disruption. In the end, optimization becomes a really key part of the story. But one of the things that we did in a recent survey is we started taking a hard look at the difference between the number of inkjet placements and the number of EP placements. And this chart looks a little funny. And for those of you in the back, the left side is the number of placements. And see that little tiny sliver of sort of orange at the top? And I apologize to those of you who are not Broncos fans. These are the Broncos colors, and I live in Denver. So the inkjet, because I know somebody was watching the Green Bay game earlier. So inkjet, the number of placements is not huge, but it's got this growth path that is really quite interesting, right? We're calling it a 26% CAGR. But that's not the important thing. Well, it is important, but then look over at the right side, and that's the pages being produced, right? So it doesn't take a lot of inkjet machines to really capture a lot of pages and push a lot of pages out into the marketplace. So there's two things you take away from that, right? One, there's a lot of EP machines still out there producing a lot of pages. And a lot of those pages are high-value pages. So you can't discount the power that toner has and the value that toner has in the marketplace. But if you're going to participate and capture share, inkjet becomes a really important part of the conversation that you want to have. And those inkjet pages, they're on about a 12-13% growth rate right now. And at any given point in time, some disruptive application could come along and cause that to go nuts, right? We look at the forecast 5 years out, but to be honest, something crazy could happen because it's happened before. So we've seen the applications for inkjet, and there's a lot of really cool industrial applications, right? As my group director is always wanted to say to me, well, you know your cabinets are printed, you know your floor was printed, and most of them were done with inkjet heads. But so the question that we got, and this one makes everybody nervous, but I'm putting it out here anyway. When do you think inkjet quality will be on car arrival, offset, or EP printing? And I'm going to put my stake in the ground that it does today, just so we're clear on that one. I'm kind of an inkjet groupie. I really like inkjet. I like what you can do with it. I have seen it produce everything from Disney-approved Star Wars posters to just incredible tabletop books, amazing commercial print. Kevin, you might not want to have a statement about this one, but if you would like to jump in here, I am happy to listen. And Steph, I want to hear from you too.
Yeah, Pat, I'm going to agree with you, actually. We've been in it for so long. It's actually in our blood. We bleed CM1K.
We were doing this back when it was 300 DPI, and we were trying to convince people that they needed business color for their transactions.
That's right. It's about business color. The technology all around has evolved. So not only the inks that we use, but also the paper has allowed us to get closer to what I would think is EP quality, right? I think also what's changed is the mindset of the consumer really wanting to be spoken to in a relative perspective. So if you're just a little off from EP quality, they don't miss it, right? What they find is it's about the message, right? And driving that data to build that message and to be able to still put out a very good quality piece. So I'm with you. I think it's there. I think it's going to continue to evolve, and who knows what's next, right?
Yeah, everything's, it's getting down to where you pick your technology based on what you think is going to work for the job that you need to do. But you have to deal with a lot of customers who are fighting that battle of trying to sell EP versus inkjet. How do you have that conversation?
We just have to look at what they're trying to produce and what they're trying to serve their customers with. We're still dealing with a lot of transactional printers, so even just getting them to move to color and on an inkjet device even is a big challenge. So it's a challenging conversation. My opinion on this whole market comes actually probably around the same time that you guys were starting this. When I was at RIT, I focused on print quality, believe it or not, and materials quality. And even back then, they were talking about when is it going to advance and be competitive to offset, because we had all of the different print processes there. And I actually printed all the print processes and compared print quality for that reason. So I definitely think it's there. I think the limiting factor is still paper. When you really want to have the conversation with your customer, it's understanding the paper and substrate availability for inkjet devices and making sure that you can color manage across multiple types of devices and those substrates to make sure branding is on par.
Right.
In Canon, you guys have huge branding. You want to make sure that Canon red is always Canon red.
And you have all those G7 qualified.
And you have all those
Absolutely.
G7 qualified people. So, and training for print service providers as well.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I thought.
Help everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's still important, but in transactional printing, and even when you're adding color messaging and color logos, you want to make sure the logo is on par with everything else. But the messaging, as you said, nobody necessarily cares if that purple is a little bit off. I am a little disappointed that the Broncos colors don't really show up on this.
Not as well, yeah.
Not color managed.
It is not color managed. But that's a really good point, is that an awful lot of brand owners, if you deal with brand owners, they really do, they seem to have their logo color like in PMS tattooed on their hand. And when we point out to them that, well, it doesn't look that way on my screen, and it doesn't look that way on my phone, and they're complaining about 2 print runs on 2 different print technologies not being absolutely identical, it's an interesting set of conversations to have. So that was a question from an Xplor member, and I'm hoping that we answered that question to your liking. At least we had a good conversation about it.
I had one thing.
Sure.
It's a story from the past, but it goes back to, again, that perception of color. I remember in 2008 trying to tell people about business colors, and boy, the brands were really tough. Their color was their color. Yeah, I remember asking them to put their business cards on the table because I had to do something, right? So at that point, I'm behind the 8 ball. They put their business cards on the table, none of them matched. Which one's the right color? Because I think maybe we could come somewhere in between. So it was just an interesting thing.
Yeah, which one would you like? We can hit any of them, just tell us which one.
Which one, yeah. So that has evolved, and I think we're doing a tremendous job in the industry of being able to hit those.
Yeah, for those sort of logo-sensitive, logo-color-sensitive things, I think we
Absolutely.
have. Now, the next question that came in has to do with inkjet. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Before you move on from that, I don't know that I agree that the exact color doesn't matter. I think maybe not to the end customer, but to the provider of the document that's branded and providing their logo out to the industry, they care a lot about getting the right color of their logo. And we spend a lot of time making sure that color is right. It's not always easy, but the color is the right color is very important.
For branding, absolutely. I was talking other messaging on the page necessarily, but
But the logo,
absolutely.
The logo
Guiding that
2008
logo.
was hard for us at Inkjet to really hit the
Yeah,
hit the
it
target.
was in
So it's
2008, but no, you're right, that color sensitivity, it's really there, but there are so many paths to it. And one of the things, I think most of the hardware vendors have teams that can come help any inkjet PSP find a path to that logo color that their customer is saying is the one that they want. But I've lived the Kevin Roman dream with the business cards and watching big brands, Coca-Cola, with executives laying all their business cards down, swearing that that Coca-Cola red was the color it had to be, and no 2 business cards matching. So the challenge is to have 2 kinds of conversations. One part of the conversation is, you tell us what color you want, we are going to get you there. It might require the right combination of paper and color management to get you there, but we can get you to the color, because most logo colors are within the gamuts that are possible in inkjet today. But it is a bigger conversation than just, in an offset, going out and buying the PMS color and putting it on the press and bingo, you got the color. It is a more complex conversation, but it is an important conversation to have. But to absolutely agree that logo colors are important. And really the whole palette, right? Because it's not just a single color. In most brand guidelines, there are anywhere from 5 to 10 different colors that are important to their brand identity kit, right? So that's important.
Just actually one other point in regards to that is the light, because the color exists in the light. You shut out all these lights, there's no color in this room. It may be there, but you won't be able to see it. So saying that my logo is critically important, being the right color, it depends on what light you're looking
Under
at.
which tungsten are you looking here?
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you're not under the right color lighting, it doesn't matter because you're going to see a different color.
Yeah, Kevin was always smart enough to do it in corporate boardrooms. Right? And that kind
Famous
of
for
different
perfect
view.
lighting.
Yeah. Joanne?
So, going back to your Coca-Cola laying out all the business cards,
Yeah.
in my experience, the people who are actually ordering the business cards have no idea what to look for. And so how does that impact? So you can put all these processes and guidelines and everything in place, and then you have whoever just ordering business cards, usually HR or somebody, and they're not going to be looking for this?
So I'll tell you that in large enterprises, one of the things that we have seen, especially over the last 5 or 6 years, is the implementation of DAM and DRM systems where the color management is built into the process. So yes, HR just goes on to what is effectively a web to print page and hits a button and says, okay, now it says Joey Gore, now it says Jonathan McGrew, now it says, Mike Brink, whatever. It's got all those things in it, but all that work has been done in the background so that the color that's produced is appropriate for the device that it's being printed on. And it is common to see that in large brand environments today where the guidelines have actually been codified into rules-based automation to make sure that color is correct. But when you get out of the top tier of companies, and it's the smaller companies or mid-tier companies that don't have that level of brand guidelines, we've all walked into very well-known companies that don't actually have a brand guideline book, right? Then it's a little bit more of a challenge.
So I think it's an interesting conversation about the brand and the logo. We tend to focus on the color because when you're buying something, you want to know it can achieve something. I think that's why people take us to task when we're selling.
Yeah.
We were having a conversation with a client in Detroit who does a mix of transactional work and a lot of direct mail work. And they said that the challenge they have with the direct mail side of the business or the more promotional side of the business is that that's where the quality becomes critical of their inkjet system. I won't say which inkjet they have because it doesn't matter, but they said that when it's transactional, it's all about putting the ink or the toner on the page as fast as possible and getting it out the door. Because largely, when we look at our bills and statements, if there's a little bit of variance in it, it's a transactional document that's communicating stuff. So if it looks good, it'll pass muster. But when it's a high-brand Mercedes piece or a Chevrolet or a Cadillac, and it's the same machine doing it, it's the workflow and the pre and post process stuff that starts to become a challenge for the business. And I think that's why we have many masters in this business, and it's the flexibility of your process to make it happen. Like you said, if you can dial it in.
But that's a good point, because in an inkjet environment, workflow and color management have almost taken on a super status when it comes to conversations, in a way it didn't when we were talking toner machines. Now, when we're talking about really mixing CYMK to hit a color, life is different. So, Kevin, you're talking to people about these inkjet workflows all the time. Do people who buy these machines understand that they're going to need to make changes to their workflows?
Well, they're starting to, obviously, they're coming to conferences like this, they're hearing it from a lot of people. I don't think they realize it until they start getting into that process of buying and saying, what do I need and what do I need to get out of it? So Canon, what we do is we have a color advising team. All they do is work with them to teach them about color, specifically in the world of inkjet, and trying to bridge the gap between offset and inkjet so that they can understand that it's not only CMYK, but it's media.
But then also, I would imagine EP and inkjet, because I would imagine a number of your customers are migrating from an EP platform to an inkjet platform.
Absolutely, and that's where that media is that differentiation, right? Where they have a hard time understanding how media plays. So we work very closely with them to make sure that they understand that, media is that, in a lot of cases, the first color, right, in inkjet. You got to understand, because that is what's going to allow you to try to hit those targets. So.
I think that's one of the reasons why people are reluctant to move some of the transactional work to, or make it at least color when they do print it on inkjet. Is it going to be color managed? Is the logo, which is the most important one, the one you typically will start with color on that application, or the pre-printed form if you want to go to more of a white paper backing model paper first. Is the logo going to look great?
Yeah.
Can we match the color? Are the transactional environments ready to do a level of color management that the brands expect? And I think some of the more
Where the DM guys are already
The
sort of
DM
in that
guys,
boat, they're used to it.
they're used to it. They still struggle with it because of all the different substrates, all the different devices, but this is a sort of a new world for transactional printers to a certain extent, and that's where, understanding that even companies like Crawford Technologies, we'll deal with color management as well. We'll make sure we pass through the color profiles, we'll acknowledge them, we won't lose any of that integrity as we do post-composition, and we want to work with Canon to make sure that you can reproduce that color properly.
Because it needs to be a well-rounded workflow to make sure you don't drop any
Yeah,
pieces.
because we don't want to lose anything from Canon, and they don't want to lose anything from us, just because we're processing something different.
The one, this huge benefit of inkjet is once you color manage and you build the workflow, the color will be consistent.
Yeah.
That's what we see out of inkjet. It's not the same on EP. EP has a lot of moving parts and a lot of things that change that actually could affect the output. What we see with inkjet, no matter if it's from Canon or from the other companies out there, is we see consistency. And I think that is something that we can put to rest now that we feel comfortable with. So I just wanted to.
And I think it's fair to mention that different machines like different media.
Yeah.
And it's fair to mention the fact that you need to work with your vendor to make sure you're getting the right advice on media to use. Yeah.
Kevin, you mentioned Canon has a special color team to work with new customers.
Yeah.
Do they work in the form of trying to create custom color profiles or like ICC profiles, or do you try to manage your existing set of profiles for the customer?
So, from the best way to look at it is we start where our customer needs to be started. So we have what's called the ABC training, which is a really a starting point in that move to inkjet color, right? What to expect. And then we move to AIC, which is the advanced inkjet color course. So this is part of any device. When you purchase a device from Canon, especially inkjet, we're going to walk you through those programs because we know the success, your success is going to depend on really understanding the technology. So then where do we go from there? We now are, we give you the ability, we actually, this is something that's just included in what we do, is making sure that we're hitting those custom profiles, we're building those custom profiles, hitting the targets. I'm going to tell you, a lot of times, we also have customers that say, hey, I have a Ricoh device. Now I have a Canon device.
Make them look the same.
Sometimes we have to match the other device.
Yeah.
And you know something? That's where a regional color advisor comes in, where we're taking a profile and building it into an input profile and actually creating what we call that device, right, that D2D connectivity. So we have no issue working with our customer throughout that process to make sure that they're hitting their objectives. When it comes to color, that is something that we offer to all our customers, just included there.
So when we started to talk about disruption, we thought data might also be a big disruptor. And we started looking at some of the data that we have at Keypoint Intelligence around the topic of disruption, or around the topic of data, rather. And we learned an interesting thing. We learned that for transactional communication providers, the combination of cost reduction and security and regulatory compliance were the two most important business objectives for the next 2 years. And to be honest, that's not totally surprising because every company, if you haven't had a data breach, you may have had a partner who had a data breach. It's becoming so common. Keypoint Intelligence, our payroll was breached. Good fun. So, just makes you realize how close to home it can hit. And so when we start talking about data, we thought that might be a disruptive factor, but in fact, I think the conclusion we drew was that, in fact, everybody has to be smart about data. That there is no company that is not in process with a plan to ensure that they are highly secure, they're highly compliant, but at the same time, they are looking to optimize the pathways in their workflows to achieve cost reduction. And in many cases, auditors, especially data compliance auditors, are suggesting that they reduce the number of workflow pathways in order to provide more secure workflow environments. So that's not too surprising. As important as data is, what we wanted to know is how you were talking to your customers about data, because it's got to come up in conversations, right?
more times than others. You can imagine. Data is that, 1,000-pound elephant, right, that sits in the room and you're trying to figure out how to deal with it. There are so many opportunities. I think if you, when you go back to that chart that you had there, you got cost reduction is very important. But realistically, what you're going to see, this data management analytics, I personally think that's going to grow. Why? Because it feeds into cost reduction. So they're really kind of coming together.
We were surprised those numbers weren't higher.
Yeah.
We honestly expected that, especially among transactional respondents, that would be a much bigger number.
Yeah.
And we were surprised that it wasn't.
They both feed right into each other. So the interesting thing is with data, is it affects all aspects of the workflow, right? From the beginning of, using the right data for the right, to talk to the right person, to create the right document, to, as you continue to move through, productivity of the machine, looking at that data, preventive maintenance. I do conversations on Industry 4.0, right, the manufacturing process. And really, data is a core lever within that. So,
Does everybody know what Industry 4.0 is? Is there a no? Okay, I got some no's. So let's do quick Industry 4.0, 1.0, right? Okay.
Sure.
Industry 4.0, 101, with that. So Industry 4.0 began as a German national plan. What they wanted to do, they were looking at their workforce, they were looking at their manufacturing capability, and they devised a plan to move towards the highest levels of automation among all types of manufacturing. In fact, in Germany, you can apply for a grant, and you can actually get some help in becoming more automated. So if you were at Lupa in 2016, you saw a lot of companies talking about their Industry 4.0 story, because it's an automation story, it's a workflow story. And the interesting thing is that it's gone well beyond Germany. Now this is a global conversation about moving towards automation. In a lot of ways, it almost felt funny to talk about it in the context of printing, but printing is manufacturing. So it really is a natural fit. And so when Kevin says he's talking to customers about Industry 4.0, we're really talking about optimization and workflow automation, taking the number of touch points out of your workflow, reducing the number of tunnels in your workflow, and using smart pieces of software to take the touch points, which takes the risk, out of how you produce the work that you produce. So that's Industry 4.0 in a nutshell. If you want to have the 8-hour version of that one, just let me know, because I can do that in my sleep.
yeah, there you go.
Right? So, Steph, when you guys are talking about data, you're coming at it, you're like hip deep in it, right?
We have a lot of different, I'm trying to decide which angle to take on this.
Everyone-
Data is so
yeah.
important. And I'll just start with, security is huge. All of our customers are dealing with data coming in, and their customers and their customers' customers all want to make sure that the data is secure. So as an enterprise is sending it to a service bureau or to their implant, is it secure on transmission? Is it secure while it's sitting there waiting for the press? Where can it go? And also our software solutions. Are our software solutions in our service bureau, are all those in compliance with security regulations, SOC 2 compliance, et cetera?
All those things.
Yep.
Yeah. It's a big story.
It's a huge.
And you need to be working with all your vendors, you need to be working with your hardware and your software vendors, and you need to be working with them together. Now, another disruptive thing that has happened, sorry.
Yeah, so you mentioned SOC 2 compliance. What about high trust? Have you seen that a lot in your clients?
Yes.
Yeah, so have we seen a high trust, because Steph mentioned SOC 2, 3, 4, 5, and a high trust, I know we're seeing it when we're doing audits.
Yes, we're getting customers asking for, because their customers, the service bureaus especially, they need to ensure that they're high trust, SOC 2 compliant, all of those. High trust is coming more and more as Kevin just said, because of GDPR especially, and as global companies, we have to be in line with regulations.
You gotta be
everywhere.
global.
So you need to understand the local regulations and security.
Yeah, it's getting to the point where you almost have to be compliant with everybody's standards in order to be able to work the way you need to work and to grow your business.
An interesting thing that I've seen more and more, and of course we would expect it after everything in the news with cyber issues, is the the growth of the cybersecurity realm within organizations.
Yeah.
And actually, we're seeing these cybersecurity groups actually, I'll say, infiltrate into the buying process, right? So you have to be able to have that conversation on, what am I going to do with this data at rest?
Yeah.
And how am I going to meet those compliance?
And that means that you have to be very cognizant of your DFEs.
Yes.
So not every DFE passes data through. In some cases, data may rest on a digital front end of a printing device, and you need to be aware of that from a security perspective.
Those questions are being parts of, they're part of RFPs and review processes. When a deal is closed, customers are asking for our certificates because they're being audited, so they need to know that. The other thing too, obviously, cloud solutions, right? So more and more solutions are being installed in a cloud somewhere, whether it's Amazon Web Services or behind the firewall. So ensuring that, whoever has access to that connectivity to the devices, if we're using web services APIs to connect, that those can't be penetrated. So it's really important, and you have more and more end users who your enterprises want access to what's going on in self-service portals into the service provider. Their connections have to be secured as well.
And if you're providing one of those cute mobile apps, you got to remember that that's got to be part of the security and compliance conversation.
Yes, question for Stephanie, actually. I work for HP with their inkjet press. I go to quite a few print service providers in my role, and I find in general, and my background is software and enterprise computing, and I find most print service providers are woefully inadequately staffed or even knowledgeable in MIS, IT, security.
Yep.
How do we foresee helping PSPs attain this level of sophistication that would be required to meet what you've been discussing?
We do a lot of consulting, and I think that's one of the reasons why you'll see Ernie's hiring a lot of former consultants and people who can take the time and go in and educate the customer on what they may not know, but also services. It's very unrealistic for a lot of these service providers to bring in an expert in various areas. And so I know Canon as well as Crawford Technologies is really ramping up our services teams and co-training on our partner software solutions so we can go in and we can educate and do the services for our customer.
And I think one of the things that you'll find, HP has traditionally put inkjet presses into more commercial environments than transactional environments. When you get into a transactional environment, you tend to find more IT staff, more data knowledge, more compliance, just because it's been the history of doing business that way. I routinely walk into print sites that have 50 and 60 programmers on staff. So with a kind of massive IT infrastructure, it's not unusual in transaction. What happened in direct mail marketing and in commercial printing is that they were much slower kind of clicking to this idea that they were going to need to have that IT capability if they were really going to survive in a data-driven world. So you walk into a shop that's doing static-only work, it's not surprising to find nobody. But the ones who are doing direct mail marketing got away without having security and compliance for a long time because nobody was paying attention to list management and things like that. And the world has done a shift. Right? So it's an education process, and it's where the vendors really have the obligation to make sure their customers are not getting themselves into trouble because they don't understand the rules and regulations. It's really easy to be blind to regulations, isn't it?
And that's why the vendors like the analysts so much too, because we get a lot of information on other solutions in the market, what the common terms are, so we can speak the same language with whatever environment we're going into.
It does help a lot. So we thought paperless was going to be a big disruptor. And a funny thing happened on the way to paperless. It's kind of a disruptor, but it's not in the way that we thought it was going to happen. So the blue bumps, for those of you especially in the back, are the actual adoption of paperless by a percentage of a customer base. So if you are one of the people who said, I only want to ever receive things paperless, either on my phone or my email, you're in the blue. But the orangey color, not quite Bronco's orange, is what the vendor, what the enterprises thought it was going to be. And what we're seeing consistently, so this is 2013 to 2017, we're just getting the 2018 data in, and the truth is that the expectations of an enterprise for going paperless versus what their customers will actually accept, that there's a bit of a difference. It does vary. If you drill down into these numbers by industry vertical, telco versus life insurance versus health insurance versus banking and financial services, there are a lot of differences, but one trend, what we have to realize is that being paperless is a requirement. You need to have a paperless strategy, but you have to have a print strategy as well. Because it's breaking out, about 15 years ago, back when Kevin and I were working together, we had got our hands on a study that indicated that over a 20-year period, it would break out into thirds. A third of clients, of customers would want to be paperless entirely. A third would want to be paper entirely for all sorts of reasons, some security, some just not trusting, some just liking paper. But a third would want both. And as we start to look at the aggregates, that's about where the numbers are. So we thought it would be paperless, and we've gotten to the point that not everybody wants to be paperless. It's just one of those things. There are a lot of people telling us they wish their providers would stop asking them to go paperless. I'm one of those. I've decided which ones I want on paper and which ones I want to be
The ones
paperless.
that are default paperless. You don't even get an option.
Yeah, nobody even asks. Yeah,
Turn
yeah.
paper back on.
I agree with those people. So there's some nice numbers in here to consider. And the one thing that we know is that printed bills and statements reliably get opened and read. And if you are a marketer for an enterprise organization, that's important to know because there is a marketing opportunity there that you can take advantage of that most people ignore when it's delivered paperless. When you have auto pay, when you get your bills on your phone or by email, you often lose that marketing opportunity. So there's a good reason to be looking at paper. We thought that linking print and digital was going to be the big answer, that it was going to be the informed delivery approach. So this is informed delivery and how many people were interested in. And how many of you get informed delivery? Which is a USPS thing. Joanne, you can't raise your hand. Okay, so for informed delivery for the USPS, it's not available to businesses, which drives me insane. And it's only available to residences, and it's rolled out kind of sporadically. In some places, they'll tell you about your packages, in some places they don't. So when you guys are looking at things like paperless and linking print and digital, this was in my informed delivery last week, letting me know that I could get some really cool savings because I have a relationship with an organization that was sending me direct mail. So how are your customers looking at linking print and digital? And Joanne, I'll come back to you in 1 second. Right?
So I'll let you go ahead.
You know, we really look at it from a preference management perspective, and on that point, I know what really annoys me is the all or nothing. I know it's like the assumption is that you either want all electronic or all print, and then when you do get marketing trying to affect the transactional output, that changes things up. So preference management is important. Getting refined preference management is huge. Making sure that I can say, okay, I would prefer my tax documents in print because I'm going to send them to somebody and I don't want to have to sit here and print all my tax documents. But being able to get marketing electronic or mobile and then being able to get my monthly statements electronic, that to me is important, and our customers it's very important.
Yeah, I mean, if we go back 10 years, maybe no longer, we started talking about multi-channel.
Yeah.
Being able to.
Oh, and for those of you, this is my Matt Swain memorial statement. Omni-channel.
Omni-channel.
That's where we're going, right? Omni-channel. Being able to deliver the documents the way you want them delivered, and it could be multiple ways, right? And that's how you leverage, really, being able to talk to those customers. You also have to remember, the millennials are different than what we've seen in the past, right? From Gen X, and everybody likes things differently. You've got to be able to talk to those users, obviously leveraging preference management to make sure that you are having that conversation the way they expect to have that conversation.
And then how does that impact the workflow? Because one of the things that we've heard from a lot of people is that they want one workflow that delivers to all channels. And is that a conversation you're hearing as well?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Being able to take, well, you know, in the transactional world, we still have mainframe documents. You know, documents coming off the mainframe, and then you have customers who want those documents delivered electronically. Well, how do you do it? And you're not going to go back and recreate a form on the mainframe to have it split out that way. So being able to take those pre-composed documents and set them up to be distributed by a specific preference post-composition is huge for us, and that's where our specialty
So,
is.
Joanne, you had a comment when we were going through the data.
Yeah, so my question was on your, the paperless versus paper statistics and how, what we thought it was
Our-
going to be.
Paperless versus
Yeah,
paper.
that one before.
Yeah, hang on, I'm getting there. There we go.
So there were a couple questions. The first one was, do we know why that the results? And the second question is, I'm sorry, the gentleman's name.
Kevin.
I'm sorry. So Kevin brought up millennials. I'm wondering how that is going to influence the future of paper versus paperless, because we know that they actually do want to receive printed statements because they
Yeah,
want
it's changed.
trust.
Yeah, it's the assumptions, I think, were wrong, right, is what we're learning from the data. And so part of this, Julian, when we dive into the numbers behind this, was part of our transaction communication study that David Scoville did. And when you look at the survey questions, we did ask a lot of questions about what they wanted to receive, how they wanted to receive it, but we didn't, in the survey part, dive into why. Now, we did do qualitative interviews on the other side of gathering data with some of the participants. And the whys are interesting because it is age dependent. Once you get to about 35, it's like you magically realize that there are consequences to your financial actions. And things like forgetting to make a car payment because you changed phones and you didn't get the notice. That was cited on quite a few of the qualitative interviews, that just being aware that the paper provided a reminder of what they needed to do. I actually had this conversation with a friend of Jonathan's when he got his first real job, and all of a sudden realized that, oh, wait a minute, I have payments to make and I have things I have to do. I better get those in the mail, because if I change phone numbers, which some, at a certain age, some people do, like they change socks, they might miss the critical piece of email or the critical text message that tells them that there's something due. Yes, Mr. Millennial?
Yes. Well, and I think I brought this up at Xplor, the annual conference, but I've since resolved this problem, but I lost my global entry because the US government doesn't give me a choice on paper notices. So it's an interesting.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so if you're global entry, make sure your email is correct with them.
Well, it's not even make sure it's correct. So it went to spam by no control of my own. And because we were traveling and we were busy, I didn't remember that it was at its 5-year, whatever the hell it was, you know, it was expiring. So I never got any of the notices. And if it had come in the mailbox, if it had come to the house, somebody in my family would have seen it and handed it to me. Somebody who gets all of our USPS, you know, look in the mailbox digitally thing. But it took me 6 months to resolve that, because I had to not only reapply, but then there were new regulations that created issues. And there's a whole other story I could tell about electronic document archive.
And one in Texas that had been destroyed.
Yeah, so my point is that it's not that electronic versus paper, it's how you get critical information and the things that are out of your control. It doesn't matter whether you're a millennial or not. I was inconvenienced and it cost me money for 6 months to get through an airport because I didn't have a notice that I should have had.
So here are 2 Xplor top tips. right? 2 Xplor top tips. First top tip, if you have global entry with TSA pre, find your expiration date and put it in your calendar. So that it will put it in that calendar so that you don't have that experience, because that will be that's a good top tip. Top tip number 2 is whenever you can, opt for both paper and digital, because that is a good way to be. And
that's super important.
yep,
One other quick question. Are you seeing the incentives and the penalties for a customer not choosing the method of communication that the company may want? Are you seeing that? Are you seeing those dissipate and go away?
so it's funny. So Kevin?
Yeah, I've actually, where it used to be an incentive to move over, I'm not seeing that anymore.
No, they mostly, and I think it's mostly because what the vendors tell us is they don't work. Because the recidivism rate, that's my fancy word. The recidivism rate on going paperless over an incentive is extremely high. So your bank says, hey, we'll give you $5 if you sign up to go paperless. And after a couple months, you realize maybe that wasn't such a good deal. Because I'm printing my statements out so that I have the paper, or because I went to go look up something and they only keep 60 days or 90 days online, and I don't have anything to go back to. And if I call them and I ask them for an archived version, they want to charge me 15 or 25 bucks. So all of a sudden, this idea that you got $5 to go paperless doesn't seem so hot anymore. And we heard that from credit card companies, we heard it from banks, we heard it from financial services companies. So across the board, it is that the incentive-based approach to getting people to go paperless it's not high on anyone's list anymore. There's still some companies doing it, but as a rule, we're not seeing it. Now, what we do see is a lot of that, what Phil Reibel of Two Sides calls greenwashing statements on your statement, whether it's on your online or your paper statement. Would you like to go green? You can sign up for paperless today. And as Phil will be happy to go into chapter and verse on, it really is not green to turn off paper. So there is there's that still goes on, that sort of subtle attempt to greenwash, but the incentive, the financial incentive is largely on the way.
But you see that the influence of millennials with that, right? Straws.
Yeah.
Straws are disappearing
Straws.
because they pollute the environment and kill
Yep.
turtles.
Oh,
So we're going to find a way to make changes, as
Yep.
also a millennial. But we're looking for detailed preferences. We want to have control over that. There are people, we don't want to necessarily have 50 options and have to click each one if there's sections that we say, yes, all my transactional, I want print or electronic. Notifications, I want SMS.
Yep.
I might want SMS and email and everything because I'm so used to 500 notifications going off all at once every 5 days. So I need reminders everywhere and not just a stack of paper at home because I'm not always at home.
Exactly.
But sometimes I do want that stack of paper at home. So options.
And some providers have gotten very sophisticated in their preference management.
They have.
Right?
Discover
You
Card
go
is amazing.
Yeah, you can slide the things all over the place and get what you want.
USA.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting. So we spoke about how the migration away from, incentives to go away. I think a lot of that, as we're having conversations, a lot of times with customer experience officers, right? This new generation of really how do I focus on the customer? They've stopped focusing on that. They want to make sure that the experience is what the customer or what their customer wants. But we're seeing a different strategic initiative, right? Let's now push to auto pay. Auto pay is huge, right? That's what, because why? Order to cash, right?
Yeah.
They want that cash. So that's where I think that strategic initiative is kind of migrate. Let's migrate toward that, and let's migrate to a better customer experience.
Yeah.
So
Because
that's
we're
what
forgetful, but we also, we get a lot of, I've had a lot of European sales reps and people from different companies say, don't you have auto pay set up?
Exactly.
Don't you have that automatically paid each month? We're like, no, we have the option to do it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are opting into it because it is convenient.
Yeah.
We're busy.
I do auto pay on an awful lot of things, and I still get that paper
And those
statement.
penalties are severe on your credit score.
They can be.
I've
Yeah.
never had to experience that.
And
Learn
you
in
never
advance.
want to.
Yep. And now the statements, because I still receive my statements,
Yeah.
actually say on there that you are on autopay.
Yep.
Which I love that too. Because
Yep.
it reminds me, if I'm not, I need to put it.
Yeah, it's trying to get it turned on, so that's good. Well, when we're talking about disruption, we thought there were a lot of things that might be disruptive, and we thought that online design tools, I still think this is going to be a disruptive technology going forward. I think if you haven't had experience with an online design tool in lieu of a more license-based tool, it will probably be coming to your life. These are pretty cool tools. If you're looking for some up on the floor, go see Kevin Helmany at Chili Publish. He's got a really nice tool that was originally designed for packaging, works great for transaction as well. Integrating DAM and DRM systems in commercial printing environments, being smart enough to be able to work with the customer, having IT staff that's comfortable working to integrate digital asset management and digital rights management systems is getting to be a big disruptor in a lot of organizations. If you don't know what digital rights management is, if you haven't had experience with it, this is a good time to get smart because things like images and marketing messages on your transaction documents should technically be managed by a rights management system. So that think of, paying Shutterstock or Getty or whoever for the images that you're using, making sure that if you've paid for photography to be done, that it's correctly tagged for digital rights management. This is getting to be a big problem for companies that have not put those systems in.
Have you seen, sorry to interrupt that, but in Microsoft Word, when you do a Google image search from within Microsoft Word or Bing image search, they'll tell you which ones have rights management.
Yep.
And you can go to the link to the source and find out what you're allowed to use it for.
Yep, and if you buy, remember, just because you buy something off of maybe Shutterstock doesn't mean that you're licensed to use it for everything. There are limits.
We're in such a world where we just take pictures of anything and use it for whatever, and we forget that there's value there.
And any of you PSPs had the fun of having a customer screen scrape an image and put it into a marketing message that they want you to print? You hold the liability, not your customer. So digital rights management, very important thing, and that is a disruptive technology. Subscription models are definitely disruptive. Augmented reality, we've talked about it in Xplor for a long time, but it continues to be a disruptive technology. So that just kind of leads us to more questions, and here are some of the questions that Xplor's also said in. We know that automation can be disruptive. How are you talking to customers about either getting automated in the first place if they're not, and I would imagine you see some who are not, or improving their automation?
Yeah, it goes back to, really laying out where you're at today and where you're going. Because as you look at automation, we've seen a lot of folks really start to grasp that. And we see what as Wayne says it all the time, those islands of automation. Islands of automation actually can be a detriment to what you're trying to accomplish. So what we say is really figure out where you're at today. Let's look at the biggest rocks, right? The biggest opportunities in regards to the process. Again, going back to that workflow assessment is so important because when you look at that and you have a whiteboard of where you're at today, the conversation of where you can go and which areas to automate first, I think are very important. One thing that we always say is as you go to that automation platform, really look at a platform that becomes that foundational approach, something that can take other tools that you're already going, right? The one thing that Canon believes in is, not to sell you the whole workflow from end to end. Let's integrate some of what you have.
We call them frameworks, right? Build a framework and plug the right tools for the right situation into them because many PSPs are paid for software they haven't used in a decade.
A lot of them, they've inherited it. We had that yesterday at our booth. They're like, we have so many solutions. We don't even know what they do. We don't know how to connect them. And I think while we're so focused on automation, some aren't automating because they're concerned about quality assurance. How do I ensure that when I do automate, that I'm still going to get the checks and balances that I need? How do I ensure that the right stuff's going out the door to the right
Yeah.
people and it's compliant? So that's significant. And I can't emphasize enough what a workflow assessment is. Being as a vendor, knowing who the other software solutions are, what they do, and reminding customers that before they buy another solution, if you're really concerned about how many you have, you might have that functionality already.
Figure out what you have already.
Pay a little bit for the services to have someone come in, train you on it, implement it, and get it integrated, and focus on creating that platform. Build the framework, and now connect all the solutions in your own platform, in your own environment, and automate what you can.
Very often when we do workflow assessments, we go in and usually the print service provider is saying to us, well, we're going to rip out this, we're going to rip out that, we want your advice on what we should put in instead. And we go in and we take a look and there's nothing wrong with what you have. Now, the fact that none of your people are trained on it might be a small detractor. The fact that the guy who actually installed it and knew how it worked retired 5 years ago. I mean, this might be a real factor in why it's not working for you. But very often the next phone call we make is to the vendor that provided the original solution. Say, hi, you need to get in here. Because these people are struggling and they're about to push it out, and we don't think that's necessarily the smart thing to do. It's already there. It's already incumbent software. So it is a conversation. Now, we also had a few other questions around software, and my favorite question, and Kevin, I know you really wanted us to talk JDF and JMF, and these are two of my favorite subjects. However, that middle question just killed me. Does software solve every problem? Yeah, okay, Steph, does software solve every problem?
Yes.
There you go.
So there's my biased answer.
There you go.
As a former consultant, and I still consult today to a certain extent with our own customers, unfortunately not. I want to tell you, yes, come buy our software. It will solve every problem. It will automate things and do,
And it can make
Your
things
wildest
better,
dreams.
but it won't fix your people.
It's a part of the overall path to a solution, right? You come in and you're like, oh, I need this great inkjet press, or I need a new workflow solution. Well, if you don't have the right people in place, if you don't have the right knowledge in place and expertise, if you don't know what you already have in your environment and creating, what the start to finish process should look like for each of your types of jobs and your own customers and what the challenges are, another piece of software isn't going to resolve that. And I know I keep thinking I should look up the data point. What is it? Most companies use 30% of the functionality within software. In the printing industry, I think it's 5 to 10%.
Yeah, it's much less.
You're using this powerful software solution for one function.
Yeah.
One, and if it does the job and it does it right, great. And what's awesome about software, even software that's been around for a while, is that newer solutions are allowing you to connect those. You want that software solution to do that one function, we won't touch it, but we'll connect to it and we'll report on it and we'll let it do its thing and allow you to connect other software solutions to do those other functions that you need done and have complete transparency. So.
Yeah, that does make sense.
I think the easiest way to look at it is software is not your workflow. It's not the same, right? It may be a piece
That
of
is
it.
the most important point anyone can make.
Yeah, it's not, and neither is the DFE. I want to make sure that
Yeah. It's not your
the
workflow.
DFE is not your
No.
workflow. So, and workflow is all encompassing, and I think Stephanie really home with it. It's the software, it's the people, it's everything to get the input to an output, right? And that's probably the easiest way to describe it and keep it simple.
So Kevin, with that sort of there, one of the technologies that we've worked with in workflow for really the last 18 years has been the development of JDF, job definition format and job definition language. And it's been a struggle to get wide acceptance on it. Finishing vendors actually sort of adopted it before some of the things that fed them. But it's becoming more and more of a lingua franca of how to hook things together because it is XML based. So let's start at the baseline. Who knows what XML is? We're good there, right? Extensible markup language, schemas, you can tag things and map them together. So JDF, JMF are schemas within an XML universe.
That's right.
And they talk in a workflow way.
That's right. The interesting thing about JDF is SIP4 creates this great platform for this, what's going to be a new language, to be able to talk across devices and applications. And, blame us vendors. We go in and we tweak it. We create our own specification.
Yeah. It's JDF, but we have a few extra tags.
Cannon's flavor.
Yeah, exactly.
Or for everybody else's
Yeah,
flavor.
and everybody said,
Yeah.
no, this is what the spec really said. But the key there is, it is what it is, right? So everybody has a different spec. What Canon's approach has been is to develop a solution that can take all those different specs, right? And actually bring it back down to what the output device or the finishing device is expecting. So think of it as almost like a translator, right? Here's my spec.
Kevin, we might call that a transform. Just saying it as a word.
It's back into the ETL days. Yeah, exactly.
We might call it.
It might be modern too, just saying.
Yeah, it's pretty modern.
And it's disruptive technology. If you think about it, what you're doing is you're putting the universal Star Trek translator in between what's being produced and what's required, and optimizing it so that it can actually continue through.
Absolutely. And even doing things like, I have no spec, but I have an XML stream.
What do I
turn
do?
that into JDF on that?
Yeah, which you can do.
Right.
Right.
And then most importantly, the JMF. Right? The JMF now is that conversation back. Hey, I did what I said I would do, or this is how it's set up.
So for all you AFP people, think checkpoint restart.
Yeah.
Right? That's basically what we're doing, but we're doing it with XML now. And so where can you go to get more information? There is an organization called SIP4, CIP4.org is the website. And if you don't understand or you're looking for more information or education on how JDF and JMF can help you optimize your environment, SIP4 is your first stop. They do training classes, they do interops a couple times a year, and it's an organization that if you are a vendor or in this space, or you're a PSP provider in this space looking for more optimization, it's certainly good to be aware
I have a
of it.
loading question.
You bet.
All right, so I think a lot of transactional printers are in here, and a lot of people have been interested in the PDF-BT spec,
Also
which is
true.
about to change, where it's not leveraging JDF anymore, and those tray calls are in the PDF itself.
They are, yeah.
So I would like comments from my
So
colleagues up here.
we started working on PDF-ET back about 12 years ago, and PDF-ET was created for a very specific reason. The PDF spec as it sat at the time was not friendly to doing variable data. And for organizations that were looking for a way to migrate away from AFP and IPDS, or were looking to augment that situation with a PDF workflow, variable data still presented a little bit of a challenge. And a group of people got together and took a look at what would be needed, and it turned out that it wasn't a huge leap to get from PDF to PDF-ET. And the initial spec was created, and it kind of got through all the certifying organizations in what we would call record time. But it was a baseline spec, and it assumed a lot of things about what was going on around it. It assumed a lot of things about JDF and JMF being in the environment that turned out not to be true. And so it meant that organizations that really wanted to use all the power of JDF and JMF ended up having to do a lot of writing in order to really make it and PDF-ET, the variable transaction form, to work together. In the new version of VT, the features and functions that pose the most challenge have been embedded into the spec. Now, from the day a spec gets released to the point where it appears on a DFE or in a workflow near you, there is a little bit of time. It does not happen overnight. So I think it's something that's going to provide a lot of consulting opportunity for like the next 5 years, because there will be early adopter organizations, the disruptors in our industry, who will be wanting to run really fast towards it because it will make their life more efficient. There are others who will wait and see what happens, And those groups will probably need your help in big and amazing ways, so.
But how does that affect your customers who have commercial print environments and they're trying to get into the transactional space and they understand JDF and JMF
Yeah.
and they're,
Well, you know, the key is not only just the print device, right? It's that communication back upstream, right, to the MIS. So in a lot of cases in the commercial world, they have MISs that can communicate those jobs, those orders back down. So they
As long as they have a
communicate-
modern MIS.
Yeah, modern. Well, you know, I think there's a whole evolution there. I think people will
Oh,
really
the number of print MIS programs in the market right now is just.
but also the overlap in workflow automation
Yes.
solutions and
Yeah.
other solutions
Yeah.
out there in the base
Absolutely.
challenge. And also in the transactional space, not a lot of MIS.
That's true, yep.
No,
It is.
no, that's right. So there is,
Yes.
from the world of transactional, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
I think, John?
Yeah, so I wanted to go back to the PT question, just from
See, you tried to.
I know you did, but, so, and maybe you have the answer in your back pocket, or maybe you don't, but do you actually have a sense of how many people ever use the actual BT spec? Because the customers, at least that I've talked to over the years, have been very hesitant to implement it because of its lack of whatever, you pick the thing. So it was always something they were interested in, but in the end, we still see hesitation to move to PDF, the newest PDF spec, and now they're coming out with the latest PDF spec, and the biggest question we get at our user conference, at our CAC, at Solomar is, when should we, and when will the manufacturers support, and what can we do to mitigate? And so a lot of what we do is take that challenge away from them. As we say, you know, look, with our expertise in the backwards compatibility of PDF as a whole, there's a lot of things that you don't have to worry about, because if you have good tools in place, you can get around it. But I don't know that BT ever really took off, unless there's data that I don't know.
Well, in US versus Europe, because
Yeah,
it's different.
big difference.
We've had this conversation.
Yeah.
So do we have a
So in the US, we really don't see BT nearly as frequently as we see in European print shops. But that was true of AFP back in the 90s. The Europeans embraced it faster and more religiously than their US counterparts, who still thought line data was fun. And then when we started moving into PDF got embraced in Europe really fast. And there's a lot of PPML in Europe,
Yeah.
right? I mean, a lot of PPML, which you really don't see that much here. PDF-ET, much more widely embraced in Europe than you see here. And I think it's a good point that there is this, there's this gap between spec and real world, especially in the North American market. I think the thing to remember is that over time, print service providers will find the level with which they are comfortable. And what happens oftentimes is that spec gets released, software providers responsible for generating that BT file, they're waiting for a customer to ask them for it. They don't put the investment into the software development to enable it until somebody says, oh, I won't buy your product unless you have this particular feature in it. Meanwhile, the guys who are working on the DFE firmware are sitting around waiting for a customer to scream, I sent a VT file to the DFE and it won't work. And then they'll start working on it. So as the North American part of the industry, we tend to be kind of driven by the PSPs who scream. And that's not really healthy, but that is the way we are. And in the US, we aren't really seeing people asking for it today.
Yeah,
So that's true.
So we're getting it more. So Crawford Technologies, we support the PDF Association and the standards, and we try to stay ahead of the game.
Right.
Anytime there's a new spec, we want support for it so they don't have that problem.
Right.
BT is one we've been a little reluctant to get into because our transactional customers don't deal with JDF and JMF, but we're getting more and more questions for it, so it's coming out.
Yeah.
We're going to support the new spec. So it's just kind of interesting.
It's one of those things to be aware of, and certainly. So sadly we've come to the end of our time. This actually was way cool and vibrant and fun, and we want to thank